Good morning, and welcome to the Boonafide Experience podcast. I'm your host, Kyle, but really, people just call me Boona. This is a business podcast with a hyper focus on esports and the creator economy. If you're not subscribed already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Doing so supports the channel and gets this content in front of people who need to see it. If you have a favorite part of the episode or have suggestions for future episodes, please let me know in the comment section below. I have some exciting new enhancements slated to be released in the beginning of May, so be sure you're following me on Twitter, which is @Bonafidegaming, for the most recent updates. Thank you so much for being here, and let's go ahead and get started with the show. Good evening, Eunice. How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
You as well. You as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for making some time to come on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's really fun to be able to deep dive into different topics and a little bit more about myself. I'm always usually interviewing other people, so I'm very excited to do this.
I heard the same thing because I had one of my very first guests that I had on. His name was Guy Blaze Spencer. He does the Gears of War commentating, and he was so pumped because he's just like, I'm so used to asking pro players questions. I'm like, man, like he's like, let me get the vibe right. Let me get this because like I want to answer some questions now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm always thinking about what I'm teaching the members at Enlight or how to extract the information from the speakers who know so much and getting them to share their experiences. And usually when I speak, it's on a panel or it's, a prepared talk on a certain topic. So yeah, this will be fun and authentic, and let's get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking about Enlight, give us a little bit of insight to what Enlight is, and what do you, who are you, and what do you do a little bit?
Yeah. Well, Enlight is something I started this year, late last year actually, and essentially it's a way for me to give back to the community. And through my 10 plus years in esports, I've really realized that there's a gap between people that are already inside the industry and they just happen to be at the right place at the right time, similar to myself and a lot of my colleagues. And there's a gap between people like us that companies are always trying to gain experience from and hire and even poach from other companies. But then the people who are trying to get into the industry, they have all the same skills. They just don't necessarily have the experience on their resume. And sometimes they don't even know how esports works, so they don't actually understand how their skill set can fit inside the industry. And a lot of this information right now is locked in people's brains, right? Like, I know how the industry works because I've worked in it and seen it grow and help build parts of it, but there's no resource out there to really teach people how to understand the industry and how they can fit in there. So with Enlight, I started this late last year, early this year. My goal is to teach professionals how they can start and succeed in their esports career. And I do that through masterclasses from a lot of the esports leaders in the space, a lot of my friends and colleagues I've known for such a long time who want to also share their knowledge, and building and curating a community in which people of like-minded journeys and pursuits, trying to really build their career in esports, can get together and talk about the ups and downs of it, right? And, not a lot of people understand what it's like to pursue a journey in esports or even work in esports. And so the community element and having a safe space to talk about how we're going through those different paths and how we're all approaching tough situations has been incredible. And, seeing Enlight blossom and seeing the positive reception around it and just learning so much myself from the masterclasses and from the community members has been incredible.
And I love that. And full disclosure to everyone listening, that is how I met Eunice. Was I actually signed up for Enlight on Twitter and on social media, and I always found I loved her flow of how she asks questions to her. Not only the quality level of guests that she brings on. I mean, these are people who not only have been in the industry but have been there a long time, who have made a name for themselves, and it's a really fun environment. And so just it's fun to like step out of that for a little bit and talk to Eunice, individually versus like me being a part of like, Kyle asking the questions. So it's a pleasure to have you on. And this is it's such a unique business. And that's why I ultimately signed up because I looked at I don't know who retweeted it on Twitter, but that's how I found it was on Twitter, and I just started scrolling, and I'm like, okay, these are like a lot of question marks that I had because I love video games, I love esports, but like this door to get into this industry is just like this mystery. I feel like if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, if you like on the very first one where they're trying to enter the mines of Moria and they're trying to like hit it with the stick and Gandalf is just constantly trying to say it, but the riddle's right there in front of you. I feel like that's what esports is.
That's amazing. That's a great analogy.
Because they're just stuck there, So obviously this business didn't just happen. We love to see, like, usually when businesses pop up, it's usually a culmination of a lot of years of hard work, and experience. And so I couldn't help but like snoop your LinkedIn profile a little bit and like look at your history and see like, you originally were at Goldman Sachs as in finance. And so I want to kind of get a picture of like how this all started, how did this journey even begin?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a crazy journey. And, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, a lot of myself have experienced, a lot of the experiences I have been through are sort of me being at the right place at the right time. I never really had a plan. I did have dreams, but one of the things I like talking about and teaching now is, okay, well, I probably would have achieved my dreams a lot quicker if I just had a plan for it. And I was fortunate enough to somehow make the right decisions to get me closer to that subconsciously. But it was never really a structured plan. And how I fell into esports has been amazing. I actually decided that I wanted to work in video games, and this was because I first went to E3, the Electronic Entertainment Expo. I went there in high school. I think one of my friend's dads had a free ticket or something, and I went with a friend of mine, and at that time we were playing StarCraft 2, just all the time. And going to E3 literally blew my mind. I didn't even realize how big the industry was. I didn't realize there were so many different kind of publishers. I didn't even realize like events like that existed. And that was me in high school. I distinctly remember thinking to myself, wow, one day I want to plan events like this. But I had no idea how. I think I somehow did internet research and found out the agency that ran E3 was out in Michigan or something. And, I grew up in Los Angeles. I had never been living outside of Los Angeles really anywhere. But, I was always pretty ambitious and entrepreneurial and willing to try new things. So from California, I actually went to Philadelphia to go to school at University of Pennsylvania. And I studied computer science as my major because that was the only way I knew how to get into video games, right? Yeah. I didn't think I would go work for the company planning E3, and there was no event planning major. I was like, okay, well, I guess the next best thing is become a video game developer. So if I code the games, then technically I'm in the industry. I hated every moment of it. Like, I cannot program to save my life. I have a 4-year degree in it, and, I still have basic understanding of it. But listen, it's just not my forte. And graduating from that, I was like, okay, well, I hate programming, so I'm not going to become a video game developer. But what are my transferable skills, and like, what do I do next? So, with Penn being number one in business for undergrads, they, all of my colleagues, all of my friends went into finance, right? Like, everyone would move to New York City, which was a couple hours away, like an hour away by train. got these high paying finance jobs, living the 21-year-old lifestyle, like having your own apartment, having a great paycheck, like living in New York City. And I was like, okay, I mean, that sounds cool. I'll take it. So like I ended up doing that. I did that for a while. Also realized I hated that. I was actually, I think, working for a consulting company at the time, and I had to help. It was management consulting. And so I had to basically review the finances of a client, which was Deutsche Bank at the time, for a consulting company. And so I had to review how they operated and how they did their finances and where they were spending their money and budget, and basically consult and give them advice on how to improve their finances and operations. And I was like, this is the worst. Like, this is awful. I couldn't care less what they do with their money. So I had a terrible time. And decided, all right, well, I guess finance isn't for me. I guess video games isn't for me. Like, I'm just going to do nothing, I guess. And I was just chilling for a bit. And my cousin, she worked a lot at events, like as a brand ambassador. So a lot of agencies exist in New York City, and they hire brand ambassadors to staff all of their events, like the people who are like giving out samples, or people who are dressed in like the branded gear and like promoting some brand. Everything from like TV show launches to guerrilla marketing campaigns, like in the middle of Times Square, to anything you could think of, a new company, a new product. And she took me to some of the events, and I just attended and thought it was fascinating. I was like, oh, events. Okay. I thought about events, maybe 8 years ago now at this point, or I guess 6 years. This is cool. This is fun. And it was, the biggest and most celebrated event in New York City. So I ended up talking to a lot of the staff and organizers. Turns out, they work for a couple agencies, and I ended up applying for a job at one of the agencies. I also ended up meeting a lot of different clients. So I met this guy who imported Russian vodka. So he would make his own vodka, import it from Russia, and get it in the liquor stores. And so I started doing marketing for him and learned a lot about how the liquor agencies work, how the tastings work. I just learned everything I could about the industry. And I worked in the liquor industry for a while, but as I was working, I met other people who also wanted my services. And so just by word of mouth, they were just like, oh, you need liquor marketing help? Talk to Eunice. And I ended up going from doing brand ambassador work myself to then staffing brand ambassadors.
Wow.
And because I would meet all these other people and clients and just connect the two. Sure. And so anyway, that's a really deep dive into, I just dabbled in a bunch of different industries, but from there, agencies do all kinds of work. And so I made a good impression on someone who introduced me to someone else, and so on and so forth. I ended up getting this huge client. Actually, there is a company, well, there are multiple companies, but there's one company in particular who designs and puts up all the Christmas tree decorations, Christmas light decorations all over New York City. So, you see those decorations literally completely all over the buildings every single Christmas, right on Thanksgiving, right after Thanksgiving. That was designed and put up by people. They don't just magically appear. And you just don't think about these things. You're like, oh, wow, pretty decorations. But no one thinks about everything that went into it. But the company hired me to manage their logistics. Hired my company to manage their event logistics and the setup and the overnight shifts. So basically when the store closes on the last day, right after Black Friday, the week right after that, The moment they close, we go in with like 100-person crew
Oh wow.
and start in different wings of the department store. And you have to have crews that are looking at these design documents. So they unpack all the decorations and they have to follow the decoration
Wow.
design doc to like put them up in the right place.
Insane.
It's crazy. And then they have to be done. I think they go until like 3 a.m., but they have to be done and cleaned up before, the stores open at 8 a.m.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was my biggest
Wow.
client. Like we put up the decorations in like Macy's and Lord and Taylor's and like Bloomingdale's. Like it was huge. It was amazing. Yeah, so that was
actually
like
really
I
cool.
ran my yeah. Well, I mean I just learned so much about random industries that I really didn't get a chance to. So it was incredible. And yeah, I think from there, I ran my own event company for about 8 years at that point. But on the side, I was just playing video games. Honestly, like I would be running these events, planning everything, and just raiding and running my guild in World of Warcraft, staying up all night, right?
Yep.
So when Riot Games in 2013 was actually starting to invest a lot of money in their esports because they were seeing huge interest in it. They saw it as a marketing play for their game. And in 2013 decided to turn it up and put a lot of money into running events at sports stadiums. So World Championships of 2013, it was their season 3 finals, was ran at Staples Center. And so that whole year, all of the planning went into what did the World Championship 2 months look like, and literally planning for that final couple of events. So I got hired in May of 2013. And the reason I got hired was that they were looking for someone who played video games, who understood the gaming audience. And I was doing that. I was playing a lot of MOBAs like Dota and League of Legends and Heroes of Newerth even.
Gotcha.
And also, I had run my event company for 8 years and had really high profile clients. And so it was perfect. It was a really good fit. I loved coming in and really helping them build that event specifically from the ground up, but also the overall esports strategy when it came to the live event. So a lot of things that we see today even come from that, right? Like Thunder Sticks. I was probably the first person in esports to bill an order for Thunder Sticks. So it was great. I mean, it was just so much fun. We really had the sky's our limit and becoming really creative and, on the community side, but really also on the back end, figuring out all of these new problems. Like, okay, well, a sports stadium is clearly not set up for internet. There's clearly not a stage. How do we actually build it out? How do we make it feel like, and I can't even say how do we make it feel like something our customers, our gaming fans are used to, because there hasn't been anything like it. So there's
nothing. Yeah, you had nothing to
like
go
there were
off of.
no. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There were no expectations, but we just went for the best, and it was incredible. I think Crystal Method was our musical act for that year, and it just
That's awesome.
I don't know if that was the first time a musical act has actually opened for an esports event, but it was pretty awesome. So that's how I got into esports.
That's like so what I heard from that, like I love that whole journey. Thank you for painting that picture, because never once did I hear this was your end goal and you were doing things to get there. It's you just went with where you saw you fit in the best and what the skills that you had, and from there it just sounded like you just stumbled around and made it work, and it sounds kind of silly when you say it like that, but I feel like that's how a lot of people get into this industry, is they kind of just stumbled their way into it. Because as you were telling the story in the beginning, I'm like, okay, where is this level of how did finance connect to marketing, how did marketing connect to Riot, and how did so in the funny thing is, like, managing the company who put up all the Christmas lights, I'm sure that gave you a wealth of experience with managing an event. Although people aren't lights, there's still the entire management crew that goes behind it. And you probably understood a lot of just random industry knowledge that many other people didn't, you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. And it's funny because I mean, I'm super fortunate that I landed where I landed and sort of stumbled around and made my way around. And, I think there's two really learning points I always get from that, right? One is that it's okay. I think I talk to a lot of college students or young people that are like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do with my life and I'm wasting my life and I don't have a job yet and I don't have a plan. And it's like, yeah,
Right.
it's okay. You'll get there.
Right.
You'll end up where you want to end up if you know sort of where you want to go.
Yeah.
And for me, the second thing is like, really like, you will find your way if you follow your heart, but you will probably find your way faster if you have a plan around it. So for
Mm.
me, I could say, yeah, maybe those sort of 8 months I spent in finance, or like the sort of 4 years I spent hating every moment of computer science, or like, I don't know, 8 years of sort of learning the ropes of the event industry in New York and random industries. Like, yeah, they all, I guess, built my skill set and resilience and emotional skill set as well in
Yeah.
different ways so that I could get to this point today, right? And if I took one of those pieces away, would I have ended up in the same place? Nobody knows.
Right.
But I feel like if also I had a more structured plan, on the other hand, like, sure, even if you as a person or listener right now don't know where you're going or where you want to go, like, that's okay. Listen to your heart and you'll figure it out. But if you have a plan, be courageous and try to follow and execute on that plan, because you're making
Yeah.
that plan for a reason and your heart wants that plan for a reason. So don't be scared and follow that, because maybe I was scared. I was like, I don't know where I'm going to go and I don't know like what event companies to go for. So I'll just do finance because everyone else, around me is
Right.
doing finance. So I wasn't very like clear in my own goals, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like really follow your heart and listen to what it wants to do, and whether you have a plan or not, that's okay. You'll get there eventually if you're listening to yourself.
I think that's incredibly important because I'm going to be a little mini spokesperson for. I listen to a lot of Gary Vee, a lot of Gary Vaynerchuk, and like he's been echoing this, and it's something that you touched on was, like, long are the days where you had to have things figured out by your 30s. You don't, like, we're so young and we're so brand new, and especially if you're younger than 30, like, good lord, like there's so much life to be lived, and we don't and I love it because he's like, most likely your parents are in their 40s, 50s, 60s and they don't have it figured out, right? It's this constant dialogue of like, it's the societal pressure, like you have to have things figured out by a certain age. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about a little bit more, because it's especially with in my site, with the way the internet works and the way opportunities presented itself, is that there is nothing linear about growth and progression and like where you want to go. Like, there's, to me, I mean, there's growth, but you're going to go here, you're going to take a right turn, you're going to spin in a circle a little bit, and then you're going to go that way, and then you're going to go that way, but eventually, like you said, you'll figure it out, you know? And I love that you touched on that. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you think that, I heard you talk, like, it sounds like the marketing and the logistics were played a big part in what you're doing, and how you got to where you're at today. But do you think finance played an important role, like working in the finance industry, understanding how that worked at all?
Yeah, I mean, I really understood how the world worked from that viewpoint.
Mm,
I think financial companies have a lot of corporate structure and
yeah.
communication, and especially with a consulting company, like how documents are set up. how you manage tons of files, how you like work with other people on the same files, how you build a deck, how you do a lot of this corporate stuff that I didn't learn in school at all. So it was really good hands-on experience. And from there, I was able to really absorb a lot of that information so that I could use it for myself in my own company, right? Like, I wouldn't know how to pitch any of the clients that I had. I wouldn't have necessarily like had the documentation, like a proposal document or like a scope of work document, right? Like small things like that. Like I wouldn't have known how to like use QuickBooks or run my own accounting or do all of these things that most founders like learn the hard way.
Right.
But I mean, it was still pretty hard, don't get me wrong, but I felt like I had a good sort of corporate background, at least built up in like the couple months that I worked there. So I'd say it's pretty important. Also, it's really important because I knew I didn't want to do it. So that like completely unlocked doors, because it's not, like knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as knowing what you want to do.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. Because what I heard was that I was really, really unhappy, and then I was just a little unhappy. And then you start, like, enough years of doing things where you're not happy will motivate someone like you, especially if you have an entrepreneurial spirit or drive or endurance to, like okay, I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to make it work,
Yeah, exactly. And I think I learned a lot about myself too in terms of traits. And maybe I was still pretty young, so I didn't quite have the emotional maturity to understand why I reacted to different situations. But I knew that I wasn't happy working in sort of these, I guess, mundane environments where everything is sort of planned out and like there's no room for me to build. It was very just dry. And it was stuff I just didn't really find a passion for. So, I think it really helped me. Maybe it could have been less time or in a different way, but it really helped me sort of shift my path in a different direction.
Sure. I mean, I got to ask a question.
Yeah.
I ask myself this all the time, especially with businesses being built around things I love. Video games, and now some of the technology around NFTs and crypto, and so all this stuff is like it's fascinating to me, and I just wonder if I was born in like the 40s and 50s, how unhappy I would have been. Do you ever like ponder that?
That's funny because I have pondered it, not specifically in that way.
Sure.
Well, actually, no, you're right. I have. I was like, how? Because I didn't grow up with internet necessarily. Like, I think AOL just came out when I was, gosh, I don't know, 10 or, in my early teens. And so I was like we had pagers, in high school. There was no smartphones. I had to page people when I wanted to talk to them, or use pager code to send them messages.
What a concept.
And I remember giving directions. Like if friends wanted to come to my house, I had to give them directions and write directions. Like there were no GPS or smartphones. So I do remember, like on occasion, I'll be like, how do people live without this super useful thing like a smartphone? Or I think once I lost my phone, or it broke, and I had to go to a friend so that they could give me their old phone so I could use a temporary phone.
Sure.
But I had to get directions from them to get to them. And I was like, oh, I've been to their house a couple times. It should be fine. And I'm halfway there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm totally lost. I have no idea where I am. So I go to a gas station. This was like a couple years ago. I go to a gas station. I have no phone on me. I don't know where I am. So I'm trying to ask this guy for directions. And he just looks at me with the most suspicious look. Like, who asked for directions? Like, how is this a thing right now? Anyway, so like there's so many things we have at our disposal now, and like internet sharing information, like all of these new creative items like NFTs and things that can like change society. I guess the conclusion I thought through was more of, and I didn't think much deeply about it, but it was
Right.
more of like, you know what, every generation has their own problems and their own
Sure.
benefits, right? Like, I'm sure, right now we're thinking about all the great things, and maybe they outweigh the bad things, but like, hey, we just went through a year and a half of COVID. Like,
No kidding.
it's been a tough year. And I guess because and like we went through, at least in the US, like 4 years of crazy political,
No kidding.
like drama,
Chaos.
right? And so
Yeah.
it's just like chaos. Yeah. And so, I guess because we're in it just feels like life.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about what the history books are going to write about it. And like, looking back at like past decades, it's like, well, they had their problems. Like, I don't know, like liquor was banned for a while and there was
Yeah.
war, and like there were huge, way more dramatic and way more like painful problems that they had to go through. But life
Yeah.
was also simpler back then, I feel like, right? Like there was no internet where you could compare yourself to like models on Instagram, or like how
Right.
good your life is compared to someone jetting around the world, right? They just like
Yeah.
had their family unit and they had their neighbors, and like life was easy if you had food to put on the table. So yeah, I think, I mean, I don't know where the sort of bar goes from like pros outweighing cons and all
Sure.
that, but yeah, I think every situation, like every generation is just different. Even now, I'm just like worried about, okay, well, what are the future problems we'll have? Like now, kids nowadays growing up with social media. I didn't, like I said, I didn't
Yes.
have a smartphone until, I don't know, like I don't know, when did I get a smartphone? Oh my gosh, I didn't even get a smartphone until my early 20s. So
Oh.
I had a BlackBerry. I had a BlackBerry that I used for work, and I loved it because
Yeah.
it has a keyboard, and so I could like type really, really fast on the keyboard.
Yep.
And my
And just real quick,
partner,
like for
Yeah.
a while back, we had to type in like with the numbers before there were these keypads and these actual. But we had to type in
Yes.
to get to the letter V. We had to type in eight like three times to get to these letters. Now
Yep.
I got really efficient with it, and it was
Yeah.
pretty impressive. But like we didn't have that shit back then. I mean, I say back then, I sound like an old man. I'm not even 30, but like it's okay. Continue. I had to like interrupt you there.
No, I completely agree with you. I remember because the BlackBerry had the little joystick thing.
Yeah,
I could
yeah.
move my cursor around so
Revolutionary.
fast, and so I had
Yeah.
my R button was broken. So like I got like, I don't know, dust in it, and I would get so good at using the cursor to like, I don't know, copy, and I use like Unicode or something to type the R instead of the R itself. I don't know how I did it. I don't remember, but my boyfriend then, who is now my fiance but soon to be husband, he bought me my first iPhone because I couldn't bear to get rid of my BlackBerry
Right.
and
Right.
and get an iPhone. And he was like, oh my gosh, can you just please like try this out? And of course I tried it and I loved it. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, back to my point where it's like, okay, well, the next generation is going to have its own problems alongside all of the pros. Right now,
Sure.
you have kids growing up with smartphones, like mental health and self-confidence and self-esteem is like a huge problem. I didn't have that. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we all do as teenagers,
Sure,
but
sure,
like
yeah, yeah.
even exacerbated by social media, right? Yeah, so who knows? Like, who's to say what comes out better or worse? It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was actually having a conversation with a colleague because we were talking about like where a lot of like the creativity is in the friction of life, and it's like in the challenge and where the friction lies is where you usually get the most creative work, and it's where the biggest, the most influential things happen, and it's like as we're getting towards like a friction, like the whole goal of businesses right now is creating less friction. And it's like the less friction we get, like, are we going to lose, that spark? Are we going to lose that generation where where people have to go through some really tough things to like figure it out? Like, is this just a level of friction, or is there going to be another level that we haven't even experienced yet? So it's like I love diving down these little rabbit holes of like what's going to happen. Is it really exacerbated, or is it just normal? Is it just our version or our perspective? I love, that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But so I like derailing the conversation a little bit and talking about these things. With
Yeah.
with COVID though, speaking of that, and we're gonna bring it back to like esports and gaming, like but first with your business, do you feel that COVID had a positive impact on your business, or did you feel that it was any way, shape, or form allowed you to get off the ground running?
So I have been really fortunate in that COVID was actually a really, I don't want to say good. I mean,
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
been, it is what it is, but
Yeah.
nothing bad happened to me or my loved ones or people I know. And so it's been a very fortunate time for me. And it also forced me to really turn off a lot of distractions and really focus inward on myself and what I wanted to do. And it was really good timing because I, got pretty burned out from working so many years in the industry. And now with the whole world like forced to shut down and we were forced to isolate in our homes. Like it was just like,
Right.
okay, well, I'm just going to have to sit still and think with my own thoughts and be comfortable with myself, and I don't have any distractions to
Yeah.
ignore that. And it really also allowed my partner and I to figure out, okay, well, what do we really want to do this year, and how are we gonna sort of get through this time and like still follow through with our plans and goals. And what we did was we have this camper van that we bought and have used it on occasion, but we wanted to renovate it. So we actually drove up to Seattle with it and
Nice.
stayed in my sister-in-law's driveway. And she has a family up there with her 2 kids, and my partner's parents are up there as well. And so we just lived there for 3 months in our van out off of her driveway.
That's awesome.
Spent like 3 months renovating it day to day. So we would literally wake up, go to Home Depot or Lowe's, pick up what we need, come back and like work on like shelving or, woodworking or things that we've never really worked on before. And it was super intimidating starting out because like neither of us really, well, my partner more than I do, but I never did any woodworking of any sort. Ever. So I learned a lot. And, I think from that experience, it was a great kickstart to, for me, like it was a great realization that I could learn something new and build something new. And it made me ready for it because it was like, oh my gosh, I just built the inside of this van and like, look what we've made. And I built it with my own hands and I didn't know starting out anything about this stuff. And, when I talk about learning and when I talk about things like resilience or things like growing, it's just stepping outside of your comfort zone and trying something new. But it's not just the fact that you tried something new, it's the fact that you give yourself confidence that you can do something new and that something amazing can come out of it. And so the more you practice that skill and the more you practice trying something, that skill, not the fact that whether you succeeded or failed in that thing, but that skill of being comfortable with not being uncomfortable is incredibly important, because whenever you feel uncomfortable, then like that's okay. You can get through it. And in the end, those skills build up over time so that you can keep trying bigger things and keep being uncomfortable, or keep being comfortable with larger and larger uncomfortable things. And that was really a very tangible example for me where it's like, oh my gosh, I've been stuck in my apartment for COVID for like, I don't know, it was 8 months. and I haven't tried anything new in ages, and I haven't even talked to people like in person. And here we are hanging out with our family and people who love us, and then I try something new, and it's like this thing that I never would have imagined, that looks amazing, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, I'm ready to do this again. So that was a real catalyst for me to get back into building a company and feeling that confidence and even excitement. I think confidence is one thing, but also excitement, like my spirit is entrepreneurial. And so when I build something, I get really excited. And I had lost that for a while, like during COVID and just recovering from burnout and all of that. So just sort of sparking that again was the beginning of my excitement for building Enlight.
And I love that, because I work for a company that I've been a business coach for the past 3 years, and I help people, they get their paperwork and they come to me and they're like, now what? It's like they just got their LLC, they just got their corporation, their DBA, whatever they're doing. And I'm basically the now what, I was a part of, I was placed I was the, point of contact, account manager, business coach. I wore 18 different hats most of the time, but we got people and partnered with an affordable CPA, an affordable attorney, and they were all part of these, whichever package they want, all the way up to like a really expensive one with like a business plan and a website and, even a virtual call center if they needed it. So we had everything, and it was just really cool to see. I had a few clients that I had no idea were going to persevere through this, and they took, like, the IRS took 6 months to get her her tax ID number, her employer identification number. And she has built one of the most successful businesses during the middle of a pandemic. And I'm just like, there's going to be like a case study that was written on this, that's going to be written on this, where it's like people that started businesses in the middle of a time where, everyone was like unsure of anything. This is the first time the whole world got flipped inside out, at least in our generation. And so I think it's fantastic to see that, because like you started a business when no one knew anything, and when people needed a community the most, and people needed these resources. And I love the fact that you combined a lot of years of what you didn't want to do, and yet continued to ask questions of like, what problem can this solve down the road? And then it's like a weird culmination of like what you didn't want to do, and then working in the industry, and then getting kind of burnt out, and then now you get to do exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. And I think for me, it's also important to be honest with myself that, that what I want to do changes all the time, depending on what my situation is, right? Like, and I like talking about someone finding their purpose, which is not as scary as it sounds, right? Like, oh, what is the meaning of my life? And it's like, no, it's not just one answer. You don't just wake up and know what is the meaning of your life. It's just really what your goals are for that year. What is the meaning of your life for that year? Or what is like the plan that you want to have for the next 5 years or 10 years, right? And there's nothing wrong with having a goal and a plan like, hey, I want to pay off my student loans, or hey, I just need a job so I can move out, or hey, I want to live by myself and be able to afford my own apartment, or, there's all these very basic and common goals that, are totally fine as your purpose. It doesn't have to be something grand or life-changing. So, I think for me, I think I always start something just because I want to build something, and I love feeling uncomfortable. It sort of sounds weird, like it's like nerve-wracking, but like great at the same time. It's like the adventure I live for. Yeah. And so that's just my goal right now. I want to keep doing things that make me feel uncomfortable and make me keep growing and learning. And that's fine. And, if I can build something while feeling those feelings that is helping other people or giving back to the industry that I care so much about, or, making connections where connections normally wouldn't have been made, that's even better. That's like even better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't have like a grand mission to my plan. Like my purpose right now is just helping people in their careers the way I learned the hard way,
Right.
but hopefully easy way for them. So that's just my simple purpose right now.
I love that, and and I want to dive into the industry a little bit. When it comes to the problem that Enlight is solving, when it comes to what the problem that you're trying to help solve, like what do you think is like the biggest, like in your opinion, what do you think is the biggest disconnect between like people with no experience in the industry, but they have comparable experience? Like, what do you think is like the biggest disconnect between people that are here and people that are trying to get there as well?
Yeah, I would say that everyone pretty much has a skill set that they like, and it's just a matter of understanding how that skill set can fit into esports. So, a lot of people say, for example, if someone who has literally a couple of people have said, hey, I work in IT, right? I do IT at a college, or I do IT at my local store, or whatever.
Sure.
And how could I even get into esports? Are there, there's no like IT job in esports as far as I know. And I'm like, well, it's not necessarily the job that you're going to transfer one to one. It's your skill set, right? The fact that you're interested in tech, the fact that you know your way around computers, the fact that you know your way around whether it's like systems admin or networking or, technical knowledge, like that's the technical skill that you have. But don't forget the sort of soft skills and the emotional skills where you know how to solve problems when things go down, you know how to troubleshoot, you know how to fix bugs where you don't know the source of the problems, and so you're like researching to find problems and solve them. Just when a computer goes down, what do you do? Like, how do you like creatively solve it, right? So there's a lot of soft skills that also apply to esports, but again, people don't necessarily know how that transfers because they don't know how a job in esports works, and so how could they possibly know what problems they would even solve?
Right.
And so for a person like that, for example, who has the soft skills of solving problems and a technical skill of loving to work with computers, well, there's literally like, I don't know, several jobs I could think of off the top of my head. You could be an IT crew for production companies that work on esport events. You could be a production person that works with broadcasts, and you're running the broadcast. You're making sure the system has all the requirements it needs. You could, be in the background of a sort of video content production room. You could be like running tournaments, not just like the broadcast side, but you could also apply your technical skill to understanding, okay, here's how tournaments run, and it's like a technical algorithm in a way, right? And all of that comes with, and even for any company, there's like live services. Like Riot Games has to keep their server up across the entire world at any given moment for millions of players, right? And that goes for any game, really, who have multiplayer. There's Twitch itself is like an entire IT company for that part. Like there's just so much, and it's really like understanding, okay, well, I have this skill set, but how can I tweak this skill set to make it fit one of the jobs, or how could I apply to one of those jobs?
Sure.
And because those jobs aren't transparent, like if I don't know, like, yeah, I know someone that works at Twitch. I have no idea what they do, right? I know plenty of people who work there. I know plenty of people who work at Riot. I don't really know half of what they do. And so my goal here with Enlight is really providing those masterclasses and like having someone go through their daily job to talk about, what skills do they use? What skills do they have they learned to improve on? What soft skills do they use? What kind of problems do they solve? What do they just do from a day-to-day basis? And so someone, let's say with an IT background who views and learns from that masterclass, they can then see, oh, okay, so this person actually uses technical skills in their role, right? Like, who knew tournament production required so many technical skills? Unless you've run one before, like, you wouldn't know that.
Right.
And really providing transparency there. Like, for me, I was fortunate enough to learn about all these different industries because I sort of fell into them. Like, I learned how the liquor industry worked. I learned how the marketing agency worked. I learned how events work. And so now I see, anytime I like see a wine tasting at a liquor store, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know how that whole process came together, right? Or I go to an event, I'm like, oh my gosh, someone had to like think about this whole event. It didn't just appear. Like, someone had to move that table right there. Like, someone told them to move that table there. It didn't just appear.
Right.
And I actually have a lot of friends that do like animation and stuff for movies and modeling and art. And now I watch movies and, you know, there's like, I don't know, like, or TV shows, and there's like a 15-second, or I don't know, like a 5-second B-roll of like someone's bedroom, and there's like funny posters. I'm like, someone had to sit there and draw out and make every single poster, and it's just 5 seconds of the whole movie. And it's like, you know, just understanding how these little things work is incredibly helpful, because then you can see yourself doing that. So back to esports jobs, like, if people can understand how esports jobs work, then they can see how their skills fit into that.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny, the longer you work in a certain industry, you can see the beauty in like what goes into so many different things the more places that you've worked. I mean, especially when it comes to businesses and corporate structure, and especially with the liquor, like that is I have only had one client that has successfully like gotten all of their liquor licenses for their business. And it's an absolute nightmare. Like, it is an absolute nightmare in order to get that done. And so I can really, like, you know, you get to, when people do that, because I know the process and I know who they have to reach out to, and I know the headache that everyone has. And so it just makes, when I go do that, I'll be able to understand, if I do that, I would be able to understand the value and pay someone, be like, you do it, it's well worth the money. Like, here you go. Like, because just take this completely off my plate. I find that ironic that I'd ever do that, because I'm a recovered alcoholic and a recovered drug addict. But the another question I had is with with people trying to break into the industry, do you feel that another disconnect, or do you feel that there is a disconnect with people wanting to break out into the industry and like get this like job immediately, versus like get their dream job, versus like wanting to get in on the ground level and like kind of work their way up? Do you see that whole lot?
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I would say it's very natural, right? Like, people don't really glamorize the hard work that goes behind something that comes out to be like this perfect, I don't know, commercial of your life. Like, I mean, Instagram is a great example. It's like, yeah, you see someone's Instagram feed and like they're doing amazing things, but do you know how much time they're putting in behind the scenes? Do you know that they work so hard 20 hours a day to get to this point, right? They didn't start out born with millions of followers. Like, they started out with 0 followers, just like everyone else, and had to work their way up there. So it's like a constant grind and a constant hustle, and, to each their own. Some people love working and want to spend a ton of time working and going after their dreams, and other people want to go after their dreams, but at a different pace, and that's totally fine.
Sure.
I would say that it's pretty tough to just go from 0 to 100, and regardless of how fast you want your pace to be, it's not necessarily easy to just go from no experience to getting your dream job at like the top company that you want to be at. And if I see this as a common thing where maybe there are jobs that help you in some way get to your final goal. So let's say you take this entry-level job that you really don't care about or is not that interesting, but you need that experience to learn about the industry or to have on your resume so that you can like get that other job or set the stage for that other job. Even if you have, to wait like a year before that happens, like that's okay because you have your whole life to work
Yeah.
on this. It's a lifelong journey, and it's not important where you are now. It's important, I guess, where you want to be in that sense, right?
Sure. Sure.
And it brings up so many different concepts. Like one that I mentioned earlier is, or maybe I haven't mentioned earlier, but I want to mention is that your job and what you think identifies you doesn't actually identify you externally. If you're looking for external validation because you have the dream job at the top company in esports or whatever, like that's great. And maybe you get some clout for that. But if you're not happy with what you do, then it doesn't give you really a source of pride, right?
Yeah.
That external validation is not going to fill up any internal holes that you have inside you in your spirit. And I learned that the hard way, through finance. It's like, yeah, I have this great job. I can afford my own apartment in New York City. I'm living the life that any 21-year-old would dream of. But I hated every moment of it. Like it gave me no joy, and it just gave me a lot of anxiety because I was trying to convince myself that I should like it. And I have the perfect setup and it's great and everything's awesome. But for some reason I didn't like it. And same thing with esports. It's sometimes you're going to be in a position where it's a stepping stone, or sometimes you just have to be humble and understand that you have to learn skills or learn certain things before you can move on to the next level.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're lucky and you fall into that next level, and maybe you could just fail drastically, and that's okay. You learn something from that, but it's much less painful when you are able to follow your plan in a structured manner, being humble and being honest with yourself, because you'll get there eventually, and you'll get there in a much less painful way as well.
Yeah, you get to spread that pain over a long period of time. It's micro doses. It's not all at once. It's not a series of horrific moments. One of the questions I did have, as well as tying back to the first one around esports, was, do you think, when it comes to people not being able to translate their job skills, at the same time, let's flip it on the other side of people that are in the industry and people who are growing it. Do you ever think a lot of there's people that just don't know what to look for, even if the skills are translatable and they do work? And the follow up to that is like, do you think the industry in esports will ever like mature to, like, I'll just give an example because we're talking about like the financial industry or like the medical industry, where it'll just kind of like, this is the way it is, this is the standard. Do you think it'll ever get there?
So, your first question was about, I'm trying to remember. It was about people translating their skills and finding the right jobs for it. Yeah, I would say it's a bit tough because if you have a great skill set, you can actually apply that to a bunch of different skills. But, there's a lot of different companies to follow now that are always hiring, and the industry is growing drastically, so there's more and more tangential kinds of companies. Like, it's not just esports teams or video game developers anymore, right? It's like esports startups, there's data analytics websites, there's communities, there's all kinds of really interesting, even NFTs, like you mentioned, right? In gaming, and like there's just all kinds of gaming and esports adjacent companies that you can work for. So it's not super traditionalist in that sense anymore.
Sure.
And I would say on that, no, it does look like the industry is growing to the effect of a larger, more traditional one, like let's say finance, or even sports, traditional sports, because now you see that it's profitable enough for adjacent companies to start building and start coming out of the woodworks and start being creative about what they can achieve in the space. And there's money behind it. So, we'll really see how it continues to develop. But it was a great year for COVID, for gaming, and esports, and people realized that esports and digital sort of spectator sports are around to stay. So if people are stuck in their homes and they're continuing to use smart screens and second screens, like, what does that mean? How do we build gaming and esports on top of all of these other industries? So how do
Sure.
we, let's say, build esports on crypto? How do we build esports and gaming on like traditional financial models? How do we build it on traditional sports models, which we've seen with franchises, right? And so
Right.
I think esports is in a great place, intersection of all of these different areas of like even
Sure.
culture and music and anime and art, right? Like we can pull inspiration from all of these different industries and really make it our own and add our own creativity to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely growing in all kinds of different ways. So we'll see.
I love that because it's there. I used to get anxiety about not knowing like not knowing the path forward or not knowing like the cookie cutter ways. If I A plus B equals C, but also at the same time, when there's no real like this is how it's done, we have that responsibility of getting to do that. We that's a really, I don't know, like to me, I used to get anxiety about it, but as the farther I go along, like that is a really cool feeling, and it makes like me feel like I have a greater purpose, and it's like, wow, what is my voice? What is my responsibility? How am I going to be shaping that? And I think that's incredible. Like, I'm going to talk about it for a little bit. I'm not sure how far down some of the rabbit holes around the NFTs and the crypto space that you've gone, but I look at this, we've already proved concepts where like, Activision made 1.1 billion in Warzone skins or in Call of Duty skins last year. Fortnite has all these characters and all these brand partnerships and all these deals and all these, and you look at all the way back to the original was like CSGO, all the CS skins and all. We've been proving the concept that like people want to pay for digital assets for a long time, and you mentioned the intersection because my main goal or my like North Star, if you will, is wanting to run my own esports team. And that's I had the vision. I still don't know exactly how it's going to happen, but it's just like I'm really bullish about that. I'm there was a moment that I had that I won't ever forget, and now that the crypto space has happened, I'm like, oh my god, is this the vehicle that I use to educate myself to learn more about what this could be in the future? Like, how does this even work? How does the creator economy work? How does this? And so I've actually like dedicated a lot of time to like trying to figure this out, or like not. I don't want to say figure it out, but like learn more about how my vision plays into this, or how like what my part into this. And that, to me, going back to the original point, is that I feel a deep sense of responsibility because when you're creating something new, as we've seen with voting laws, and with all these all these really tough political things that we're having to undo, once things are set, once the culture is established, it's so hard to undo that, whether it's right or wrong. It takes quite literally, an act of God to get some of these things done that should have never been there in the first place. So I feel that there's this like incredible sense of responsibility to like actually do and build this like the best way we think.
Yeah. And, I think it just depends on the person, but I love your perspective in that, we have this responsibility that we get to do this.
Right.
It's not just something we have to do. It's like fun, right? And if it's not fun, then don't do it. Like
Right,
this is
right.
not necessarily going to be, at least the sort of entrepreneurial and growing side of it is probably not going to be super exciting for you if you don't find it fun. So, there's still pretty large companies like video game developers who have been developing games for a long time, like Blizzard and Activision, and we'll basically see what happens. Games are going to be around, but games will evolve, and we'll see what happens. But I like that you find it exciting in that, it sounds like, you obviously also have an entrepreneurial spirit and running this podcast and, doing all kinds of cool things in your life. And so being excited by NFTs like makes a lot of sense. And you have, the, not just I guess not just responsibility, but the opportunity to build what it looks like and be a part of that. So it's super cool. It's really awesome to be like that. But, I also wouldn't be too worried about like culture right now. I mean, I don't know, it took like the sports industry hundreds of years in a very different world to
Sure,
get to
sure.
where they are today. But things just changed so much, especially with the internet and communities, like I guess online communities being able to
Yeah,
just be spun up so quickly. Like things happen overnight, even with
yeah,
like, I don't know, GameStop, for example, and
yeah. I
how
was
that
literally
just
gonna say that.
came out of
Yeah, yeah,
nowhere. It's like,
yeah.
who knows? Like, we could totally think one thing is done and set in stone, and like, I don't know, some random initiative goes viral on social media and like,
Yeah.
breaks all of our expectations. So who knows? It's exciting for sure. So I'm really excited to see how esports evolves in the next couple of years.
I am too. I think it's incredibly, I'm incredibly excited about that. And it's fun that you mentioned things that happened overnight, and it ties to some of the Wall Street beats and the GameStop and A&E or AMC stocks. There was actually what happened from that moment, which is something that arguably played a major role in Clubhouse's development, is that the host of the good, there's the Clubhouse show on the good. It's called the Good Time Show on
Yeah.
Clubhouse. I love that show, and I had never heard about it until they somehow landed Elon Musk on there. I don't know how they did that, but they literally broke Clubhouse that night. They broke the entire app, and there was no one that was able to get into it except the 5,000 people. But look at everything from that moment. Look at the level of guests they've had on there. Look at the way they've driven the space and the awareness of all with these majorly influential people. And it's fascinating how that stuff just happens with a click. The power of the internet's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that night. I even tried to get into the room, and then there
Yeah,
were all these like other smaller rooms that spun up, and I guess someone was trying to stream it and all of these things. And
I
I
watched
think
it on
we ended
YouTube.
up listening to a stream. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But that was cool. That was, yeah, who knows? Like, people are creative. We'll come up with something random and totally cool and totally amazing. So,
yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
I love it. I love it. I want to start wrapping things up here, Eunice, and I want to touch a little bit more, kind of like towards your end goal. What is the legacy that you'd want to leave behind here? And have you, yeah, what is, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. What is the legacy you want to leave behind here?
So I would say that the legacy I want to leave behind is really being known for, or okay, let me rephrase that. The legacy I want to leave behind is that I have made an impact on something in the industry that I care so much about. And whether that's helping individual people, whether that's helping connect to companies, whether that's creating a program that can further scale and help more people, or whether it's me just individually mentoring and helping people, like all of that really fulfills me, and all of that really makes me care about what I do, makes me excited to wake up in the morning, and helps me get through like either boring times or scary times. So,
Sure.
I think my real mission here is just being true to myself and combining what I know best, which is building stuff, with what I want to do the most, which is helping others. And Enlight has been great for that. And I'm just constantly building and constantly being amazed by people's reaction and positive reception to it. So we'll see what it becomes. I'm just super excited and grateful for everything that it's been so far. So yeah, that's really my main goal here.
I love that. I love that, and I can speak to as a student, as a member of Enlight. I can definitely speak to that. There's a lot of
Thank
opportunity that have
you.
come from that. There's a lot of community that came from that, and you have something special here. So I'm excited to see where this goes. And real quick before we on this topic is that one of the main reasons, say like the guests were great, your website's beautiful. One of the main reasons that I actually signed up was because there was a part in there that said, I'm still growing, and you get to be a part of helping me grow this. And you left the door wide open for like suggestions and feedback, and like we get to grow this together. I may be in charge of this, and that's honestly that was the selling point for me. That was like when I'm like, oh cool, like I get to help build something. This is dope.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that very specific
Yeah.
compliment. I love that.
Yeah, that was literally the selling point. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, I like building things. I like helping people build things. Like, this is cool. So where, like, where can people find you? What's your social channels? Where do you want people to go to learn more about Enlight and more about yourself?
The website is enlight.gg. So definitely go there and learn more about what we do. And more new products and new things to come. I'm always thinking of amazing programs and boot camp and workshop ideas to come up with. So working on that in the background alongside our membership program right now. My Twitter is Eunice Chen, and the Enlight Twitter account is EnlightGG. So find us on there and feel free to message me anytime. I'd be happy to chat with anyone.
I love it. I love it. Eunice, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed this one.
This was fun. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me. And yeah, I will see you around. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye, Kyle.